Well, good morning. This is actually an easy time to get away from the office because you don't want to be there. I get it. I didn't either. That's why I'm volunteered to do this. So, again, my name is David Cash. I'm the superintendent of Chickasha schools. This is my third year in Chickasha, 13th year of being superintendent, 28th year in education. I'm going to honestly say the most exciting thing I've ever been a part of as an administrator, as a teacher, is this approach of personalized learning. I actually talk a lot about this, and so I'm going to start at the beginning and kind of get you through our journey of where we're at and where we're going. I also want to give you this caveat. I do not come to you as an expert on this. We are still novices at personalized learning. And if you start this journey, you will be too, but as you go through it, you will get better and better just like anything that you do. So I've got some folks here, so at breaks, if you want to ask some of our folks or myself, feel free to do that. I do not come to you as a salesperson. The technology piece is important to this, but it is not vital. And I'll explain as we get into that later. It's important, but not the most important thing by far. So I'm not here hawking anything. Do not care what you use. I can just tell you what we do and what our experiences have been, and if you care to know that, ask me, and if you don't care, that's okay too. Julie Cash is sitting over here in the corner trying to hide. She is our data coordinator. She's in charge of our NWA throughout the district. She's also a parent. And so when we get in, if you want a parent perspective, she absolutely can give you that, and she can give you the data pieces much better than I can. In the back, Renee, raise your hand, and Cindy are both elementary principals. We will get into some elementary components of this. Our high school gets a lot of attention because we jumped out in that, but this actually is regardless of age. There's components that will be impactful for your kindergarten teachers, for your fifth grade teachers, and so on. And so if you have specific elementary questions, they'll be here till about noon or so. You can pin them down as well. Okay, so where we're going to start? Well, our journey started in November of 2015. The Resource Center here hosted a gentleman from Salt Lake City, Ken Grover. And Ken is the principal of Innovations Early College High School, and they were doing some unique things. Ben was my tech director when I was at Locust Grove, and he called me up and said, "This guy's got a strange look at life. It's very similar to yours. You might want to come listen to this guy." So I did. And I came with full skepticism, and I hope I've got a few skeptics in the room because that's, again, I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I'm just going to tell you what we're doing and then give you the data to show what works. So I showed up. I listened to Ken, and I tried to poke holes in this thing. But I'm a see it, I've got to see it to believe it kind of person. So I can tell you all kinds of things, but I need to see it with my own eyes and ask the people that are not you if that's really true, you know. So I hit up Brent and said, again, I'll see it when I'll believe it when I see it. He agreed to fly myself, my high school principal, and board president to Salt Lake City to see it for ourselves. And within about 10 minutes, I was sold. Not by the principal, but by the students. Because I watch the students, and I interact with those students, and instantly I knew this was something I needed to implement. I didn't know what, how, when, and all those things. I just knew that Chickasha schools needed to start this journey. And so that's where we began this process. So November, we started, and let me back this up with, my board president was also the state teacher of the year. I don't know what year it was, but so she was a teacher. So when she was there with teacher eyes, my high school principal had been a principal in Oklahoma City before Chickasha, and a teacher in Mustang, teacher eyes looking at this thing. And when we interacted with the students, that was the selling point. Now, fast forward, we start our implementation of personalized learning, our public meetings and all those kind of things, but we continued to ask the questions. Why is this working? What are the components that make this work? And really, that's the more important journey than the actual flight to Salt Lake City that started this thing, is what makes this thing work? I mean, what are the nuts and bolts that make personalized learning better than what we've been doing? Also backtrack and tell you this. I've never, as a teacher and as a principal, I've never been a fan of the Oklahoma standards-based approach to educating students. As a teacher, I absolutely refused. I taught, and I took great pride in teaching. To give you a funny story on that is one day I walked into my classroom and there's 3 teachers in the back from another school district. I was teaching at a very small high school in Oklahoma. And I said, can I help you? Because we didn't have guests there. And they said, we're here to see what you do differently. I said, okay, well, have a seat. And I taught, and my kids wrote, and we interacted, and we did the thing, we did the deal. And at the end, they came up very perplexed, and they said, we're trying to figure out again, why are you successful? And I said, I don't know even what you're talking about. They said, well, 100% of your kids passed the EOI. Yeah, of course they did. What did you do differently? And I said, well, we didn't review, and I didn't have them practice test. We just taught up until the day of, and then we took the test, and then we kept on trucking. That's what we did. The very flabbergasted teacher said, well, I mean, how did you get your kids, you know, to learn how to bubble and do all that stuff? And I said, ma'am, they're in high school. If they don't know how to take a multiple choice test by now, we got bigger issues than passing that EOI. And then I started reflecting, well, I didn't do multiple choice. We just wrote and we talked about big concepts. And actually, you were teaching them to think. And lo and behold, they can take a test. That gives you my background of why I rail against standards all the time, because I didn't follow the Oklahoma standards. I just, where did they need to know something? Okay, let's teach that. And we've gotten away from that. And so when you see some of this stuff, you're going to see kind of my history in there, because I think the worst thing we do in education is we dumb it down for everybody, and then everybody just sits there. And you've got a bunch of potted plants in the room, they're just sitting there. And that's the last thing we want to do. No one got into teaching to water the plants. You got in there to inspire kids. And so you're going to, this is a whole different mindset. And if you can get that out of today, we've been successful. So first thing I want to do is, this is what I call the tipping point video for my principals. This is the edited version that you're going to see. The original version is 18 minutes long. This one's 6 or 7 minutes long. But as our conversations got going, we kept asking the questions, what would this look like in elementary? What would this look like in junior high? And it wasn't until my folks grasped this concept did we ever move forward. And so we're going to start with this, and I think it's going to reveal some things to you and get you thinking. I am going to call on some of you, because if I have to speak the entire time, we will be asleep, or we need more coffee, man, something. Got it, all right. So, perfect. Be prepared to share out what was an aha in watching 7 minutes of this, okay? So as soon as we're done, I'm going to start pointing at people. If I know you, you're in trouble. But then be prepared to share something out of this.
Please welcome to the TEDx Sonoma County stage, Todd Rose.
It's 1952, and the Air Force has a problem. They've got good pilots flying better planes, but they're getting worse results, and they don't know why. And for a while, they blame the pilots. They even blame the technology. And they eventually got around to blaming the flight instructors. But it turned out that the problem was actually with the cockpit. Let me explain. Imagine you're a fighter pilot. You're operating a machine that in some cases can travel faster than the speed of sound. and where issues between success and failure, sometimes life and death, can be measured in split seconds. If you're a fighter pilot, you know that your performance depends fundamentally on the fit between you and your cockpit. Because after all, what good is the best technology in the world if you can't reach the critical instruments when you need them the most? But this presents a challenge for the Air Force, because obviously pilots are not the same size. So the issue is, how do you design one cockpit that can fit the most individuals? For a long time, it was assumed that you could do this by designing for the average pilot. That almost seems intuitively right. If you design something that fit for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. And 60 years ago, an Air Force researcher, Gilbert Daniels, proved to the world just how wrong this really is and what it was costing us. Here's how he did it. He studied over 4,000 pilots, and he measured them on 10 dimensions of size. And he asked a very simple question. How many of these pilots are average on all 10 dimensions? The assumption was that most of them would be. Do you know how many really were? 0. Gilbert Daniels proved there was no such thing as an average pilot. Instead, what he found was that every single pilot had what we call a jagged size profile, right? It means you're not, no one's at the same on every dimension. And this makes sense. Just because you're the tallest person doesn't mean you're the heaviest. It doesn't mean you have the broadest shoulders or the longest torso. But this is tricky because if every pilot has a jagged size profile and you design a cockpit on average, you've literally designed it for nobody. So the Air Force realized they had a problem. And their response was bold. They banned the average. Meaning that moving forward, they refused to buy fighter jets where the cockpit was designed for an average-sized pilot. And instead, they demanded that the companies who built these planes design them to the edges of dimensions of size. Meaning that rather than design for, say, the average height, they wanted a cockpit that could accommodate as close to the shortest pilot and the tallest pilot as the technology would allow. And today, we have the most diverse pool of fighter pilots ever. But here's the thing. Many of our top pilots would have never fit in a cockpit designed on average. So, most of us have never sat in the cockpit of a $150 million fighter jet, right? But we've all sat in the classroom. Here's what I mean. Even though we have one of the most diverse countries in the history of the world, and even though it's the 21st century, we still design our learning environments like textbooks for the average student. No kidding. We call it age appropriate, and we think it's good enough. But of course it's not. I mean, think about it. What does it even mean to design for an average student? Because a student is not one-dimensional, like struggling to gifted. Students vary on many dimensions of learning, just like they vary on dimensions of size. Here are a few obvious ones. And just like size, each student, every single one of them, has a jagged learning profile. Meaning they have strengths, they're average at some things, and they have weaknesses. We all do. Even geniuses have weaknesses. But if the fighter pilot example has taught us anything, it's this. If you design those learning environments on average, odds are you've designed them for nobody. So the real question to me is, how do we get these adjustable seats for learning in the hands of every student as fast as possible without spending more money? Here, I actually think the Air Force has given us the formula for success. What if we ban the average in education? We know it destroys talent. Instead, what if we demanded that the companies that sell these materials into our classrooms design them not to the average of dimensions of learning, but to the edges? It would be a bold move. It would certainly send a strong signal to the market. The game's changed. But trust me, if we do this, not only will we increase the performance of the kids in our classrooms today, we will dramatically expand our talent pool. Because right now, there are so many students we simply cannot reach because we design on average. Design to the edges, and we will reach them, and we'll get their talent. And the good news is, we don't have to anymore. I'm telling you, we have a once-in-a-lifetime chance right now to fundamentally reimagine the very foundation of our institutions of opportunity like education in ways that nurture the potential of every single individual, and therefore expand our talent pool, make us far more competitive in the world. We can do this. We know the formula, and it's time we demand it. Thank you.
Hey. Okay, that's the edited version. The 18-minute version goes on, and he actually tells he is a Harvard fellow that was a high school dropout. You put those two together, they don't line up, right? It's not the typical high school dropout. So give me a takeaway.
One size does not fit all.
One size doesn't fit all. Is this true? We know it, yet we continue to do the same thing, right? What else? If you volunteer, I won't have to call on you. Give me a takeaway. Right. Who do we buy textbooks for in Oklahoma? Well, when we could afford textbooks. Who were they designed for? Written for? Actually not even the whole nation. Texas, California, New York. All the textbooks are written for 3 areas based on their standards. And then we just had to modify based on whatever the legislature decided our standards were this week, right? I mean, this is illogical, and yet we continue to feed this beast, and it's because we were sold a bill of goods. And in educators, in education, we typically just try to do whatever we're told to do. But when you get down that road, eventually you find out that was not a good road, because who determined we were going down this road? In Texas, do you know who it was? One person, H. Ross Perot. That's where the whole standards movement came from. A computer scientist took over Texas education and said, we need standards. I'm not sure how qualified H. Ross Perot is. He ran for president. He had some great charts. You old folks know what I'm talking about. But he took over, he hijacked Texas education. I can tell you, when I started teaching in 1989 in Houston, Texas, the veteran teachers already were seeing the problems with this. It had only been enacted 2 years when I got there. I didn't know any different. I was right out of college. I was happy to have a job. They knew then that we were on the wrong path. And I vividly remember conversations with veteran teachers who I respected saying, this is going to kill kids. And they were right. It just took, thank God we elected someone from Texas to be president, and then he jammed it down the entire nation's throat, right? So this whole concept, but this is not just me saying this, because me saying it again doesn't mean anything. I'm getting ready to kill you with some data, and the data just to prove what I'm saying. Because, again, I can give you my opinion, and it don't mean much. but the data does. So I'm giving you, this is Chickasha Public Schools. And so this is the number of our students not on track for college. And you can see the slippery slope starts in 5th grade and it continues and it continues and it continues. Right here is the part that woke me up. 4.5% of our sophomores were on track for a 24 in math. 9.7 for a 22. We talk about college and career readiness all the time. And then you say, when you look at this kind of a slide, you think, again, I'm going back to the video we just watched, who are we going to start blaming? So, who are we going to blame? Teachers. By God, 6th grade teachers are not, they can't carry water in a bucket. But what in the world happened in 7th grade? They tripped and fell carrying the bucket. And we just crucify these teachers based on this information. But we're not getting this because of our teachers. It's the students, right? We got to blame them too. You know Johnny, he is a moron. And my test scores will reflect it because Johnny's a moron. How many principals in the room, how many times have you had a teacher sit down at your desk and say, look, you're not holding me accountable for these. They are the worst group I've ever taught. Ever hear that? Every year I was a principal, I heard that. Every year, look, that group I had last year was really good compared to this one. You know how bad they were. So, and I'm not saying some of that isn't true, but when you start looking at the data, here's our predictor on how we're going to score on state assessments. I'm going to flip back and forth here because I want you to see something. Concentrate on 10th grade. This is saying 40% of our kids are on track for proficient, 19.4% are going to be advanced. 9 and 4.5. Something's wrong here, right? This is a predictor of state assessments. This is getting them into college at not a high level. This is what you need to get into a state school. This is our predictor based on where our students will perform on state assessments.
What was your screener on the math?
NWA. This is all NWA results. It is a great predictor of ACT and ULAGAW. I don't know if Michael's even here. They've been doing it for 10 years. And when we were converting, I called somebody that's been doing it a long time, and he said it is a great predictor of ACT. Now, it is a predictor, not fact, but it's going to give you some good tools to analyze. Also look at where's my 5th graders? Okay, 40% proficient, 27.7% advanced. 22% on track here and 14%. What's my takeaway from why am I showing you this? They don't line up. Oklahoma has lower standards than college readiness, okay? But what do we always celebrate? What is the data pieces that we always look at? We always look at this. Really this. I don't know if you guys, if you remember back when we first started this standards movement in Oklahoma, you got API scores. And you got a 4 for every kid that scored advanced and a 3 proficient, and that was 1 year. And then the next year, it was 3 and 3. You didn't get more points for scoring advanced. So what did we start doing in schools? Hey, just pass that stupid thing, right? As a criterion test, right? Criterion reference test. We know it's low-level standards. How many of you passed the driver's exam? I'm hoping most of you. It's a good thing. That is a criterion reference test. I don't know about you, but I drove here today. Every one of those people passed that test. That did not make them good drivers. It just made them they passed a low-level exam, right? Okay, this is what we do. I'm still going to kill you with more data. Here's reading. Again, you look at that and you say, hey, that's not bad. You know, 22, and you put those two together, it's not bad. And when you look at the statewide data for reading, in Oklahoma, we do a decent job at reading. Math is not as good. But again, looking at these two things, here's some big picture stuff. And this is, the reason I'm showing you this is there's some big points here. Number one, here's the national averages for ACT, statewide averages, and Chickasha Public Schools. We're scoring a 20.9 on composite. That is above the national average, that's above the state average. You just saw our data on predictors. Would you have put those two things together? Because I had one person say, yo, you guys got a problem in Chickasha. No, we have a problem in our state. I mean, we just got it announced yesterday, we're one of the top 40 high schools in the state by U.S. News and World Report. I have no idea how we made it. The radio guy called for an interview and I said, George, I got nothing. I'll say something for you to record, but I have no idea how we got there. Because this doesn't line up for me. When I look at our statewide numbers compared to national and our math in particular, I go back here and I look at that and I say the end product, why were we below the national average in math, comes a lot down to this, but more importantly, it comes down to this. We have low standards, and we are hammering kids to get them to pass a low-level test. What are we doing with the kid that is above that? What do we do currently? What do you do in your school? Bore them to death, okay? This is a wake-up call for me. Going back to that video, my oldest son is very gifted in mathematics. He is not gifted in English or reading. He's not. But he was considered advanced, gifted, whatever, and he played school all the way through. And he will tell you, in fact, I should have had him come talk to you, because he would tell you how he worked the system. And my wife will tell you he is god-awful writer, correct, gifted in math. Thank God he went into engineering, not into English, okay? What did he do in third grade when I'm touring the halls of Locust Grove Upper Elementary School? Every time I walked through the halls, almost without exception, he was in the hall. And what does the superintendent / dad do? What did you do? Right? Why are you in trouble? I'm not in trouble, I'm tutoring. He was tutoring every day. Third grade, spent every day tutoring another student. And I asked the teacher about this. Why is he tutoring? Well, he's really way ahead on this. Okay. But Johnny's not. And he's helping him. You know, because if we teach it, he'll know it better. Well, he already knew his addition. He didn't have to drill that. He's got it. So in third grade, he was the potted plant. Now, he was very compliant. He is a rule follower to the T. That came back to his kindergarten year when he got the board. I was the interim elementary principal for about a week, and he got in trouble. And so we straightened that out real fast. So he is a rule follower to end all. But he wasn't learning anything, okay? And we do this all the time. This ACT stuff is a huge indicator because it is a national. We can compare ourselves to everybody. And not Dave Cash saying it, but you can look at any research study on standards. Oklahoma has some of the lowest standards in the nation, okay? But I would contend this. Even if we had high standards, it still we're robbing kids. The standard where it meets does not line up. Here's some more trends. I'm really looking at these bottom ones right here. How is standards working? How is it raising achievement in Oklahoma? Here's our state average in math. Now, we'll say this, the number of students testing is increasing, so that would cause some of this. Standards working for our kids?
Doesn't this mean that we have a national
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And talk to educators around the country, they will, yeah, Oklahoma's not alone in this problem. I talked to a math teacher in Massachusetts. He's a friend of a friend. And I said, why did you go into teaching? He said, for the money. That's odd. But then when he told me their average salary, I said, okay, I understand. I mean, truly, he was an engineer that went into it. I would contend in Massachusetts why you see such high ACTs there is because they are able to go get people. They go get anybody they want because of the salaries they pay. In Oklahoma, we have the double-edged sword of terrible pay and terrible standards. One more nationwide trend again. I want to talk about this thing. I learned this as I got into this, and I don't want to give you wrong information here, so I wrote it down so I wouldn't lie to you. Anybody ever heard of recentering? ACT and SAT do something they call recenter. Oklahoma calls it something different when we change the standards. I'm not sure what that is. You know, when Janet Barisi was famous for holding on to the scores until about July, and then we'd craft them to tell a message, and then we'd change the cut scores. And in essence, recentering is changing the cut score. 1989, ACT changed the cut score. The average ACT score went up 2 points. From 1989 to 1990, went up 2 points. In SAT did it in 1994, and let me throw this one at you, because this floored me when I bumbled across this. 1994, for every 50,000 students that took the SAT, 1 made a perfect score. In 1995, for every 1,400 students that took it, 1 made a perfect score. Did we change the standard a bit in there? I would contend that looking at this, we might be staying afloat as far as averages. I say those averages don't line up. And if you look at ACT scores going back historically, with the recentering figured in there, we're not staying like this. I would say we're more like that as a nation, which is absolutely the truth. Oh, I got more data for you. I proposed to my wife in spreadsheet form. Not true. Fairly not true. I'm a data geek. I am that person. I've got to know it's going to work, and I'm going to question the way you did it. But when the data keeps coming back telling a story, you have to wake up to it. Okay, look at this. This is our best and our brightest. Hey, from the 27th ranked high school in the state of Oklahoma, the 33 freshmen at Chickasha High School have a 4.0. This is March 1st. We took the NWA assessment in winter. That's our predictor. 60% are not on track for ACT college readiness in math. These are our best and brightest. So of 194 freshmen, we have 33 with a 4.0. 60% are not going to make the mark in math. They're going to pass whatever exam you give them. They're just not going to be able to get into college. 50% in reading. This is our best students. So now, what do we do differently? And why are we doing things differently? If you go back and statistically analyze your district, you are probably going to see a similar tale. I make the joke of the 27th ranked high school. I don't believe that. I just think it's funny how we craft messages around people and things, and we don't get down to actually the nuts and bolts, what is working, what is not working. What we've been doing for years is not working. Let's go ahead and acknowledge that. Why are we continuing to follow our leadership? It's kind of like the tag on your mattress. You know, you're not supposed to rip that off. I have yet to find anybody that's going to write me a ticket or fine me for ripping that off. And the same thing is true for standards. The standards police are not going to show up at your school and arrest you. They're not going to come to your teacher and say, you deviated right here. What are you doing? It's not going to happen. What happens if we start deviating based on the student, not the standard? We put them on a continuum, a learning continuum, but we deviate based on what their skill is and what they're ready for. Here's 5th grade. 5th grade is not personalized learning like it is at our high school. It's way different. Because age appropriate, you would never turn them loose. Ever. So, I want the cynics to look at this. I need some critical eyes on this because I'm going to give you 2 sets of statistics on this. One is, okay, same student. So 2001, something happened there. 2015-16, 38% below the national average for growth. The only statistic we really worry about is growth. I could not tell you our letter grade. I cannot tell you what percentage of our students pass any state exam because I don't even open the envelope. I don't look online. I don't care because it doesn't matter. We just went through the stats showing it doesn't matter, but we are fascinated with it. In fact, we don't even give our teachers the data because we're trying to break that from them because we've drilled into them that's the only thing that matters. And we've got to break them down from that, okay? So, last year, 38% below the national average for growth. There's their projected RIT. You NWA schools know what this is. If you're not an NWA school, you need to look at that. Again, I'm not a salesperson, but that's the best data you can get on growth of your students. I don't know what STAR is right now. We used to do STAR. It wasn't nationally normed then. It might be now. I don't know. Again, I'm not hawking anything. Here is current. So we tested them in winter. We went from 38% below the national average for growth for 48% above the national average for growth. These are the same students. But something changed. This is 4th grade. This is 5th grade. What changed? Well, the obvious is the teacher. We moved buildings, we moved grade levels. But we started personalizing based on math and reading these students in a blended environment, meaning these students, part of it's technology-based, part of it's teacher-driven, but none of it is tied to the state standards. All of it is tied to wherever they're at. So let me pose this question to you. Every one of you have this student in your school. 4th grade student reading on a 1st grade level. What do you do with them? 4th grade student reading on a 1st grade level. What happens to that student?
You'll pull out.
Yeah, we pull them out. So, but we can't, they've got to have that 4th grade content, right? I want you to put yourself, do you remember 4th grade, any of you? I don't, but I'm sure I had a good time with it. I'm trying to think of a 4th grade mind working. And so I'm going to set in this 4th grade classroom, and I'm going to learn 4th grade reading level and math, although I'm not ready for any of it. But then this afternoon, when I'm supposed to go to PE, because we've got to get more time, Larry Lazat will tell you we've got to get more time in. Instead of going to PE, I'm going to a pullout. But then I'm going to learn 1st grade reading and math skills wherever those are at. Can you see the confusion? That's like driving with somebody that hasn't ever driven a standard before. They're getting herked and jerked around. They have no idea what's happening. Their neck's about to break. So they get a little success in the pullout, but then tomorrow, where are they going to end up? Back in the 4th grade room. We are trying to screw this child up. So what happens to that child? Because I'm starting to be aware of my surroundings and I'm starting to be around of my peers, and I don't want to look dumb. So what do I start doing? Acting like a moron. Because if this can't be important to me because I'm not good at it. So I've got to act out to be cool with my 4th grade friends, and I got to start, you see this, how this is starting to spin? However, how many people pull out like that? How many schools do that? Raise your hand, fess up, it's okay. We're all among friends here. What else would you do?
Small group.
small group, we can kind of group them. You're the bluebirds and you're the bunnies. And everybody know the bunnies. It's not, you know, that's that group. So, all right. Let me give you another stat. This is the part that blew me away. We used Odyssey Ware for our blended. This is the year before. Needless to say, when I looked at their statistics the year before, I thought, wow, we are not growing kids. In fact, we were so traditional, in 1950s teachers would have been proud of how traditional we were in 5th grade. Sit down, be quiet, sit in those rows. So we took this on as we need to intervene here. We need to give them, so we piloted this, and we piloted this. I know this teacher real well. You couldn't dynamite her away from doing this now, and the year before you couldn't get her to budge on doing anything differently. It was the kids' fault. 15% of her kids hit their growth target. It was the kids' fault. It wasn't her. She's a master teacher. Can't be me. I've done this for 25 years. I'm dang good at this. Ask me. To 71.4. I can also tell you this one. The lowest amount of growth, and I'm not exaggerating this because Julie was instrumental in making this happen. If you had one that was the laggard, that was them. And guess what? The other ones knew it. So when they got the results, they're looking at this one like, what are you doing? You're killing your own kids. And it's not me selling it anymore, okay? So teacher growth, off the charts, not so much before. This is not what we're doing at the high school. It is not. It is very much structured still. But we're addressing where they're at. You bet.
You're saying here that this is the percentage of class who met their growth goals. So is this, what are those growth goals based on?
It's nationally normed per child. So each growth goal is individualized to that child. Great question. If I am a 5th grader reading on a 2nd grade level, I'm compared to every other 5th grader reading at that level. What is the normal growth for that child? If I'm a 5th grader on 8th grade level, what is the normal growth for that child? Great question. Again, why I like NWA, it is normed. It's normed for that child. Each one of our kids has a growth goal. And the kids can tell you what their goal is. They're tracking their own goals. We'll get to that piece later. Here's some high school stats for you. Again, I'm killing you with stats. I promise that this is the only part of the stat program. I figured if I didn't do it early, you'd fall asleep. Our personalized learning campus that's what this is. Everybody stumbles on it, me too. I usually just call it PLC, but it's the Student Personalized Learning Campus at Chickasha High School is the official name. We looked at overall GPA for these two student groups. But I was real curious, because in traditional school, at our high school, we offer both. We have a personalized learning option, we have a traditional option. We started out with approximately 150 kids in personalized learning, and we had about 525 in our traditional side. Okay? There's your average GPA. The students that are below a 2.0, in our traditional side, 8.8, 1.5 in our personalized learning. Students that are a 4.0, 16 and 12. Why would those two, why are we looking at these two, would you think? That doesn't make sense. Why do we choose these marks? What now? There we go. We're making the connections, the edges. Let's get to the edges. In your high school, what does this kid look like? Can you describe this child? Bet you can. That's the kid that's skipping. Remember the 4th grade analogy? Well, they've mastered it by high school, right? I mean, you have got to have some group to associate with, and that one tends to clump together. And they are the ones that everybody talks about in this teacher's lounge. Good God, can you imagine so-and-so? You know he's with that group. Well, yeah, they're with that group. They've got to do something to stick out. They are 16 and full of piss and vinegar, and they're ready to conquer something, but it's not school because they're not even good at it. So I got to be good at something else. So I'm the rebel, I'm the class clown, I'm the, fill in the blanks. This is the part that actually kind of floored me. We got 16% of our kids with a 4.0 at our traditional model. Our traditional teachers will tell you, you loaded up all the good kids in this, and we're stuck with everybody else. That's not true. But I will tell you this, that group right there doesn't have to work nearly as hard as that group. And I want you to ask the students when they get here this afternoon. They will tell you. In fact, one of my board members' daughter is in personalized learning campus at Chickasha High School. Brent, if he was here paying attention, would be able to relay this story. He came to visit, and he sat down. I said, go sit down with any of the kids. I don't care who you talk to. He sits down with my board member's daughter, says, what do you think of it? You like it? No. He said, no. I'm working twice as hard as those people in that other building, and I'm getting the same grade, and I'm working twice as hard. And my dad doesn't care. I thought that was a great part, which is true. The dad doesn't, the ex-military guy, he doesn't care. But he will tell you her achievement levels have gone off the charts. She's also on an IEP. Here's our first round of data. I will say that our data will be better in about 2 weeks because the only comparables we had was our freshmen. So this represents our freshmen that are in personalized learning and traditional because we needed comparable data. Next, in a couple weeks, I'll have comparable data on every one of them. Reading, 67% below the national average for growth, 28% above the national average for growth. That's huge, 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 huge growth. That's probably the hardest thing to grow in high schoolers is reading because we don't do that much of it anymore. In math, 14% below, 57% above. You know, if this was mildly leaning one way or another, I'd get up here and say, we're still working out the kinks kind of deal, and we are. Again, I told you at the beginning, we're novices at this. We're just starting the process. We will be better in August than we are now. And then the following year we'll be better then than we are now. But the results speak for themselves. They are over the top. This is the national percentiles of where these students rank. In reading, 91st percentile, 76th, 40th, and 56th. I talked to these teachers. I asked, what do you account for this? And they said they have to be problem solvers. To work in this environment, you have to be a problem solver, not a problem doer. Problem solver or a doer. We're producing lots of doers that can come out and not do anything. My son walked in one day and said, hey, what time is it? I looked at the clock, which was right there, and I just stared at it. I thought, what is wrong with you? There's a clock. Why would you ask me that? They do it. We have 4 boys. They do it all the time. Here's the stat that's not academic. Look at this little deal. I just ran this yesterday because I was curious. I had no idea. This is the part that'll floor you. Of the 352 discipline referrals, 149 of them are truancy, skipping class. You ever have one of those classes in high school? I took a Spanish class where I walked out of the window. If it was second floor, I would have jumped out to end the misery. Half of our kids, on average, have had half a discipline referral per child is basically what we've got in our traditional model. And I'm not even sure what that would be. That's a pinky. Absences, 8.8 to 5.48. These are when you look at things of why this works, kids want to be there. You will see a student this afternoon who is hammering me for summer school. She is a straight A student going to college, wants summer school. High school student wanting summer school, 4.0 student. That doesn't even make any sense. None of you did that. I didn't do that. I think she's out of her mind. But then when I talk to the principal and they're like, no, about a third of them want summer school. They want to keep learning. Isn't that different than what we always hear about kids? Kids hate learning. They just want to go do whatever they do. Dang teenagers kind of deal. No, they thirst for knowledge and they love this because they're guiding it. It's so different. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts, I promise you, but I got to beat you over the head a little bit with data because I'm not convinced everybody understands that our system is flawed. I'm just not convinced of it yet because we keep going back to it. Well, why do we keep going back to it?
It's the only thing we know how to do.
There you go. It is absolutely the only thing we know what to do with. We've always been trained like this. When you sell this to your people, who's the hardest group to sell it to? Your teachers, because they've seen every program we've thrown at them. I don't call this a program. This is a philosophy. This is a way of thinking about it. This is not a program. The worst thing you can do is come away from this and say, you know what? We're implementing that Chickasha model. No, you're not. You need to craft your model, whatever that is. Because when we went to Salt Lake City, this is what we do is not Ken Grover would stand right next to me and tell you, you adapt it to your needs, your faculty, your students. That's what makes it successful. There is that idea of rubber. We're not going to be, in August, we will look different than we look right now. Because my teachers are driving that. We'll get to that part too. They're driving what needs to change, not me. I did my part and I got out of the way. My principal did her part and she got out of the way. Our teachers are driving what's happening here. That's why I'm excited that they're able to join you. I made fun of you earlier. You must have got the text message. I don't know all these people yet, so. This is what we call, and I'm trying to think, there's a professor at Stanford that uses these same terminology, and if you can get through her book, it's really good. I've tried a couple times, but it's a nodder. There we go. Standards movement has not produced significant growth. We have thrown billions and billions of dollars at it, and it's still not working. We have narrowed the curriculum down. Every one of you that is a teacher or have taught recently or in any time in your life, which should be all of you, know that this is true. We have narrowed the curriculum down, which is producing narrower focused students, and it's not producing results, and we have a low bar for students. We do. You know who's easy to convince of this? Parents. And I'll be honest, I got a few that are throwing spears at me all the time. And the funny thing, dynamic, is they're teachers in other districts. They don't know, they don't get it yet. And I don't understand that. If you've taught it all and you have a compassion for kids, you know deep down in your core what we've been doing is not working. And we've got to do something different. So, yes. I want you to hear from teachers.
We had a principals meeting, and Mr. Cash showed us a video called The Myth of Average. And after I watched that video, my mind just started spinning out of control on the way home.
If you design something that fit for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. You design a cockpit on average. You've literally designed it for nobody.
The myth of we're going to teach the high ones, we're going to teach the low ones. You know, what about if we're just going to teach this one skill in the middle? That's not going to work. And who am I really hitting? We're not growing anyone.
I told Cindy, I was like, if it wasn't for, you know, her attitude toward me, because she knows, I mean, I'm labeled as the old school, you know, because I have been doing it so long. And I was just real hesitant.
I had mixed emotions. Probably from teaching for 17 years, that was the holdback. We've been taught one way and we've done it one way, and so just nervous of, can we do it?
It's just a whole different mindset. You know, you have to think outside the box, and I am so used to being in the box and having control and it being this way, and I'm, you know, kind of OCD in that way, that I was just like, it had to be done this way. And she was saying, it's going to be small groups, you're going to meet kids on their, you know, on their level. And I thought to myself, how is that not good? You know, that's what you strive for.
Personalized learning is what's better for the student. I have a broad range of students in my classroom, and they all are at different levels. So before, I would teach just a 3rd grade skill because that's what we've been told and that's how we've always done it. And so now I can hit the kids right where they're at. I have a kid who's working on exponents, and then I have kids who are working on you know, regrouping, addition with regrouping. And a kid who is working on exponents is going to be super bored with just a 3rd grade skill. And so that, you know, I was having behavior problems and boredom, and they weren't growing.
I have one student, he's working in 4th and 6th grade standards and skills. And I think I would have held him back to just in his box in 2nd grade, because that's a grade level I teach. And he would have been so held back, and he's doing, you know, area of a triangle right now, and that's a 6th grade skill and different things. And I think, the sky's the limit.
We want to empower the kids. We want them to feel like they are in control. They get to pick and choose. It doesn't matter what order. We have things that I call it a checklist, and you know, they have things that they have to do, and then there's the can-dos, you know, so you may do this, you have to do this.
They have a voice and choice. They get to choose when they do something, so they can choose their favorite thing first, or they can leave their favorite thing for the last, but then they have their may-dos. So they have things that, you know, sometimes are more work in their may-do list, but they'll still choose them because it has a different reward at the end, or they just enjoy that skill more.
At first, I felt like I wasn't needed, but I see all these light bulbs come on, and it's exciting. Yes, it's emotional because they're actually learning where before you just had that few. And now everyone in your class is.
Teachers always say they go into this profession to see the light bulb. And before you'd see the light bulb with, you know, maybe 3 or 4 students a day. But now you see it, I mean, 25 times over every day. So it's fulfilling, it's really rewarding, and the kids genuinely enjoy it more.
I would encourage anyone that has questions or skeptical like I was at first to please give me a call. I would love to talk to you about this, because that was me at first. I've been here 28 years. I've seen a lot of programs come and go, and I, you know, would enjoy visiting with you and telling you about my journey in things that were going on here at Grand Avenue.
They started after Christmas, those teachers. So we dove into this, again, starting the questioning process, the talking about it. Why is it a flawed system? Teachers have to come along at their pace as well. Every one of our buildings is at a different place based on their capacities right now. What happens when you get overwhelmed? You shut down, right? What happens when your kids get overwhelmed? They shut down. Teachers are the same thing, and there are fickle creatures. You can't throw this up on them and expect this just to come up roses. It's not going to work like that. I am one of those. I am super impatient. It is a flaw to the ends for me. I will die wanting my funeral to hurry up. We got things to do. And so in my mind, when I understand this, I go 100 miles an hour, let's go. And I was guilty of that. I didn't give my principals enough time to digest some of this stuff. And I'm constantly asking the questions. Grand Elementary took a leap of faith at Christmas, and they got it. Do all of them get it? No, they do not. There's some faculty members there that are absolutely locked down. This is overwhelming to them. Does not make them bad people, does not make them bad teachers. They're just overwhelmed with it because they've done the same thing for so long. The 2 veteran teachers, Jeannie Lee has started in 1989 teaching. That is the most, she made a comment to me when she was thinking about this. She said, I'm gonna try this because it makes sense, but I'm gonna try it. But I've always prided myself on knowing where every one of my kids was at anyway. I saw her a week later and she said, I didn't know where they were at. I said, what? She said, I lean down and I look at a kid and he's doing something I never thought he could do. I was holding him back. Kids are really good at playing school. We teach them how to play school. They know how to fool you. Because if I can pretend I'm dumber, you're not going to ask that much of me. What happens when you're at one of these things and the guy goes, the speaker says, all right, I need a volunteer. Everybody looks at their shoes. From this perspective, it's hilarious to watch. Everybody's like, oh crap. I'm not doing that. Here's what I would encourage you all to do, is don't take Dave's word for it. Go look. This is what opened the eyes of my people, is we fanned out and we covered lots of ground. And you know what? We didn't find much in Oklahoma when we started. In fact, nothing. This is where we started the journey in November of 15th. I've been to this place in Dallas, saw some things that worked. I also saw some things that didn't work, and that's really important. What is not working? Warren, Arkansas, they were kind of forefront on the competency-based learning back 5 or 6 years ago. We went there and saw some things that were remarkable. We also saw some huge flaws with what they're doing. Julie even asked the question, she said, how do you measure success? And then you could hear the crickets in the background. I mean, they had no idea how to measure what they're doing. Is it working or not? We're going to get into those details as well. Warren, Indiana, which is right outside of Indianapolis, we flew a group of principals up there. This stuff, you look at it and go, well, crap, we got budget cuts, and we got this and that. I get it. This is really cheap compared to going to conferences. Go to one conference anywhere, and you can pay for all your people to do all this and get a whole lot more out of it. We just started picking brains of people who are doing it differently. Epic Elementary, you can't even get a tour of this place. It's outside of Kansas City. They are inundated. In fact, we got bumped one time because the Missouri State Board of Education was going to be there all day. And it is a project base. It's a different deal. It's way out there, but they're successful. That model was good for them. Springfield, Missouri, we've sent lots of people. I don't know how many people we sent. We've sent 2 different groups of teachers, principals, and then I've actually called some places. I really wanted to go to New Orleans bad, but there wasn't working. I was so disappointed in New Orleans. I thought, but the food. I'm talking about the food here. I called that principal and said, so would it be worth looking at this? And she said, absolutely not. Okay. And they didn't have all these components. We've called lots of people. We talked to lots of people. So when we started here, we've run through this, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. But I would get out and send people, so when you start building, you're drawing from experiences from more than one place. Because again, we saw what didn't work in some places, and that's real important, because you don't want to go down the path of what's not working just because it's cool. It's not cool to use your kids as the guinea pigs. I want you to write down these answers. Work with the person to your left or your right, somebody, because I want to get into this part of it. The components that actually need to be in place for you to be successful. The first one is data-driven decisions. So I want you to write these down. At this point in time, we're also going to take about a 5, which always turns into a 10-minute break. So go to the bathroom, get a water, work with your person, and then this is going to start getting interactive for us to really grow through this process.